Okay, so we're going to look at multiplying and dividing fractions this morning, all the various types, with vulgar fractions or common fractions, multiplied by mixed numbers and integers. Integers are?
Numbers.
Whole numbers, yeah, that's right. So let's start with a vulgar times a vulgar. So we'll have 2/5 multiplied by 15 over 16. Okay. So if we look at the fraction, you know that to multiply a fraction, that you multiply the numerators and you multiply the denominators and then simplify if necessary. Now, there is a way, though, that you can simplify before you actually do the multiplying by doing something that's called cross-cancelling. So if you look at the fraction and imagine that you've got those two, the denominator of the first one and the numerator of the second one, and then the numerator of the first one and the denominator of the second one, they form a pair, okay? And if you look at them and see whether or not you can find a common factor between those ones, if you can find a common factor, it means that you can simplify before you actually do the multiplication. So looking here, we've got 5 and 15. Obviously, we've got the highest common factor of 5. So there's 1 5 in 5, and there are 3 5s in 15. Then, if we look here, we've got a 2 and a 16. Again, highest common factor of 2. There's 1 there and 8 there. Okay? So now, all you do is you've got a new denominator and new numerators and new denominators. 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 8 is 8. Now, had you wanted to do that the other way, you would have done 2 times 15, which is 30, and 5 times 16, which is 80, and then you would have been able to cancel to do it that way. So either way is fine, it doesn't matter. I tend to cross-cancel if I can at the beginning. Particularly helps if you've got big numbers, like big denominators and big numerators. Okay, so is everyone okay with that? We all understand how to do a vulgar fraction with a vulgar fraction. Okay, let's do a vulgar fraction with an integer then. So let's have 3 over 7 multiplied by 2. Now, the first thing that you have to do when you've got a vulgar fraction or a common fraction with an integer is make the integer into a fraction as well. So 2 whole ones is what as a fraction?
2 over 1.
2 over 1, that's right. So we always put the whole number over 1. And then again, you look at it. Can you cross-cancel? In this case, you can't. Okay, so you just multiply the numerators.
6 over 7.
Yeah, multiply the numerators is 3 times 2 is 6, and then 7 times 1 is 7.
Can you cross-cancel like 3 over 7 if you could?
If you, what do you mean? Could you simplify it if you?
Like if it
You mean if that had been 3 over 6, would you have simplified it to a half?
Can you?
It's very unlikely that the question will have an unsimplified fraction in it. But if you did, yes, of course you could. Okay? So let's look at one like that then. Let's have 4/8 multiplied by 5. Jasmine asked if we could simplify that before we started, which of course you can. So 4 over 8 would become a half, and then you'd multiply that by 5 over 1, which would become 5 over 2. And in this case, we then have to change it back to a mixed numeral, don't we? So what would that be?
2.5.
2.5, that's right. 2.5.
I just don't get how you got 2 over 1. Did you start off with 2?
Yes, it started off with a whole number of 2.
Right.
And so in order to be able to multiply them, you have to make them both fractions. So you make 2 whole ones into a fraction by putting it over 1.
I get that.
Okay. The one thing you will, I'll just rub this out for a second. You might see it like that you see in the question. The actual whole number might be bigger, but it doesn't matter, you can still put it over 1. Okay? Right. So that was a vulgar by a vulgar by an integer. Now we're going to look at a mixed number by an integer. So let's have 2 2/3 multiplied by 6. So 2 things that you have to do here. You have to do something to both those fractions. This one you need to change it to an improper fraction, so that will be 8/3. And then this one you change to a fraction which is 6/1. Now, then the process is exactly the same. Go back here because we've got to sort of, I mean, that one's an improper, they're both improper fractions, but we can still do the same thing. And we can cross cancel. So is there a way that we can cross cancel this, Cody?
The 3 and the 6.
Yeah, so that will become 1 and that will become 2. And then you just multiply it out. So it's 16/1, which is 16 whole ones. That's right. Okay. Good. Then we need a mixed by a vulgar. So a mixed fraction will have, say, 7 2/7 multiplied by 5 6.
That's 6, not 7.
Sorry?
That's a 6, not 7. You said
I said 6 2/7, didn't I?
you said 7 and 2 7.
Oh well, anyway, 6 2/7. So, again, first thing you need to do is change this one into an improper fraction. So that will be 44/7. And then obviously the second one can stay as 5/6. Now, you can cross cancel, but only, it's not going to end up with a 1, but you can reduce it somewhat by dividing both of them by 2. So that one could become 22 and that one will become 3. Okay, and then we do 22 times 5, which is 110 over 21. And then how many 21s are there in 110? 5 remainder 5. 5 remainder 5. So it's 5 whole ones and 5/21. Okay, so that's the only really tricky bit, working out how many 21s there are in 110. But once you've worked that out and the remainder, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so that was a mixed times a vulgar. And then the last one of the different types of multiplying is a mixed times a mixed. Now, if you can do the others, you can do these. So obviously, following the premise that we've been using, what will you do to both those fractions?
Make them improper.
Make them improper. So can you do that for me then?
The first one would be 11/3 and the second one would be 19/4.
Well done. Okay, any way to cross cancel? Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not, no. So, what's 11 times 19?
209.
209, yeah. 209 over 12. Now, this is the difference between the year 8 kind of fractions that you're going to get and the year 7 ones, because you will get big denominators like this with, big numerators with denominators that you've got to kind of divide into them. So obviously we know that 20 times 12 is 240.
17 and 5/12.
So it's 17 and 5/12, is it? Did you use the calculator?
Yeah.
Yes, don't use the calculator because you won't have it in the test.
Right.
Okay? No, you won't. Because if you only gave me that one answer, you'd get 1 mark out of 4. Okay? So, you'd have to work out some way of working out how many 12s there are in 209. So, 240, there are 20 12s, aren't there? And so if you take 36 away from that, it's 206 with the 3. So it's 17 and 3 12ths, was it?
It'd be 3. It would have to be
3 12ths, yeah?
5/12.
Oh, 5 12ths. It must be 204 then. Yes, of course it is 204. And 5 12ths. So 17 and 5 12ths. Okay. So is everyone okay with multiplying then? So there's just the various things that you have to think about. You can cross cancel, you need to convert mixed numerals into improper fractions, and then if you're left with an improper fraction, convert it back to a mixed numeral. Now, if you can multiply, you can divide. The only difference is that you do something to the second fraction. Now, this is the word that you need to learn, reciprocal. Reciprocal. And the reciprocal of a fraction is, so if we've got a third, its reciprocal is 3/1. If we've got 6/7, its reciprocal is 7/6. If we've got 3.5, you'd have to make it 7/2, and so its reciprocal would be 2/7. Okay? So you need to be able to find the reciprocal of the second fraction. So if you've got something like 6/7 divided by 2/5, the first thing you would do is find the reciprocal of the second fraction. So it would become 6/7, and then the reciprocal is 5/2. And then because you found the reciprocal of the second one, you can also use the inverse of division, which is multiplying. And now we know how to do it, because we've learned how to do multiplication already. So then you look at it, can you cross cancel? Yes, 3 and 1. So that becomes 15/7. And then you make that back into a mixed number, which is 2 1/7. Yeah.
With the reciprocal thing, why do you only do it to one number?
Because if you did it to both, you'd still have to keep the division sign. So that doesn't help us.
Do you just choose one, or do you?
You always do the second one. It's just the convention to always do the second one.
So do you have to do the reciprocal?
Yes, you have to. To divide, you have to. Okay? Remember, well, let's have a look, because Montana asked a question. She said, do you have to do it to the second one? So if we've got 6/7 divided by 2/5, if we find the reciprocal of the first one and then divide, 7/6 multiplied by 2/5 and leave that as it is, we get 14/30, which is very different, isn't it? Because, remember, what does the word commutative mean? Can you remember? We talked about it in the number theory topic. 2 of the operations of number are commutative, 2 of them are not. Commutative.
It means they have a distinct value.
No, good try.
Does it mean like using a similar method?
No, good try.
Does it mean like 6 take 5 is the same as?
Except it isn't, is it? 6 take 5 isn't the same as 5 take 6.
Like 6
But 6
times
add 5 is the same as 5 add 6. And 6 times 5 is, yeah. So addition and multiplication are commutative. Division and subtraction are not. The order in division and subtraction really matters. So you do always find the reciprocal of the second fraction. Okay? Yes?
You would simplify that and you'd get the reciprocal of the answer of the previous one.
Yes, you would. 7/15. Yeah, you would.
So
How
if you won't do it
interesting.
that way, you can just do a reciprocal of the
How
answer.
interesting. Okay, so let's have a look at a mixed numeral divided by mixed numerals. So we've got 2 1/4 divided by 3 3/5. So first thing you need to do is to make your improper fractions. So 9/4 divided by, remember you have to keep the division sign first of all, 18/5. Then you find the reciprocal. So it's 9/4 multiplied by 5/18. Can we cross cancel?
Yes.
Yes, the 9 and the 18 will cancel. So it's now 5/8.